The American Theater Wing and the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts bring you the American Theater Wing's Guide to Careers in the Theater. This session, The Producer.
I am Ted Chapin, and with me is Emanuel Azenberg, one of Broadway's premier producers, who has at least one, if not more, shows on Broadway at the moment. But I thought I'd ask with the simple and basic question of, it's 2001, what is a producer?
It's a two-part question. What was a producer and what is a producer? I wondered about that in the early years of my life in the theater. I didn't quite know what a producer did. I understood what managers did as time went on. And then when I became a producer, I not so jokingly said, a producer does two things. He chooses the play to produce, and he tells them when to close it. Both decisions are difficult. And we used to do this from the reading of a play. You would get a play, you'd read it, and you'd say, yes, I want to do that play. That was a big decision. It was also, if not a creative decision, it was one that had sensibility in it. So you were judged by what plays you produced. So if you produced a rinky-dink comedy, then you were judged that way. If you chose to do something that aspired to something better, then you at least got those kind of credits, and you wanted those credits. So the first plays that I did was an off-Broadway play by Nui. Yes, that's how you pronounce it. And
I'm taking notes.
And then we did The Lion in Winter. Jimmy Goldman was a friend, and Hal Holbrook and Mark Twain. And then later on, Gene Walsh and I did Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death, which was the first kind of hard-nosed black play on Broadway.
So that's a spectrum.
So
right
that was, and those decisions were made from not the Holbrook one, but the three plays were made from the script. It's different now. Now you go and see them.
Okay, before we talk about now, let's go back to the was, because I think there's an ideal there. There's an ideal model, anyway, about what a producer does, which I think if you look at books that say what a producer is, I think they'll say, you know, you choose a play, you raise the money, you hire the director, you get it cast, and then you produce it. Is that model, is that accurate model in the then?
In the then, yes. No question about it.
And how did you...
We also had more people to choose from, and there were, at least for me, there were many more plays, although we still read 200 a year.
Where did you get the plays, and where do you get them now?
In those days, you got them from your contemporaries. The plays that we did, that Gene Walsh and I did initially way back in the 60s, in that other...
Right, that wonderful era.
That other time, came from friends. Your contemporaries, all of whom were starving, we all starved together. So Jimmy Goldman wrote The Lion in Winter, and he said, why don't you do my play? Hal Holbrook was a part of this group. Nobody had any money, starving. It was Redford and Bill Goldman and Jim Goldman and Pete Masterson, Frank Gilroy. And so we decided to do Jimmy Goldman's play. Hal Holbrook walked in one day and said, what are you doing? He said, we're doing Jimmy's play. He said, why don't you do me? And that's literally how it happened. It was kind of a joke at the time, but and we did him.
Where did you all meet? I mean, if these were your buddies, where did you start?
I met Gene Walsh when I started work for David Merrick. Gene Walsh was friendly with Frank Gilroy and Jimmy Goldman. They all, at some point, connected in Chicago. And so then I joined that group. I met Redford playing baseball. I was a company manager of his first Broadway show. That was Sunday in New York. He got $300 a week. I got $225. I remember that.
Well worth it.
And it was Redford who introduced me to Neil Simon on the softball field. I mean, we played
that's important stuff.
That's how it happened.
But to go even farther back, because I think one of the things that people who watch movies and they see, you know, in the movies in the 40s where a producer wears an ascot and wears a, you know, Homburg and comes in and says something pithy and goes away and the audience cheers. When you were a kid, did you have a notion that you wanted to be a producer? Did you know what it was, or did you just...
No. I know it sounds strange, but there was I had no ambition. I had diligence. But I thought I understood what the manager did, not right away. I always wanted to work in the theater.
Right,
The theater
that's
seemed
key, it would seem.
Yeah, I was introduced to it early. I had an uncle who was an actor with the group theater, and I went backstage to see John Garfield in Skipper Next to God, a play by, I think, Jan de Hartog or John Van Druten, or somebody with 3 names.
Right.
In any case, so there was an infatuation. And then you saw Death of a Salesman. You
Yes.
said, oh my. You couldn't believe that, what that did to you. And growing up in New York, that's what you did. You went to the theater. So, but what producers did were mysterious. When I got my first jobs after I came out of the Army, I learned what a manager did, what a company manager did, what a stage manager did. And I said, I can do that. And that would allow me to work in the theater. One of the differences of then and now is that everybody who aspired to the theater really wanted to work in the theater. And you were really organically connected to what was on the stage. So if you were the gopher on Death of a Salesman, that was good. It was the class of what was on the stage was crucial. It wasn't so, it was just a job to do a comedy or a routine comedy, of which there were many. But to be connected with, as company manager, Tennessee Williams in Milk Train, Tony Richardson directing. Yeah, I was there. I put that on the resume of my soul, that I was there when Tennessee Williams wrote a play and Tony Richardson directed it.
But it was important for you, first and foremost, just to be around and then to see where it led you.
It led, I suppose, inexorably, but it was without intention. Maybe that's how I made it through, is that you couldn't read the ambition on my forehead. I wasn't a threat. So first was a company manager, then a general manager, then a producer. And the first production was as Gene Walsk's co-producer on The Lion in Winter. He was the one who initiated that, and he said, I have trouble raising money. So I said, well, I'll help because I'm his friend. And then I got wound up with billing.
Okay.
And made all the stupid questions, you know, do you think that this play is about this and that?
Raising money, obviously, in the list of things that a producer actually does, obviously identifying, in the old days, as you said, identifying a script that you thought was worthy of producing. Next step?
The money wasn't a problem. It's a problem in one sense. You have to do it, and it's tawdry. You know, you're selling what is really and ultimately not a good investment.
Do you find people approach you now that you're successful? Is it still tawdry, I guess, is what I'm asking?
Well, you should have guilt feelings about it because it's not. Well, the stock market is disappearing, so I guess it may, at the moment, it may be better than the stock market, but it isn't regarded as a wonderful investment, coupled with the fact that there were responsible producers and there are irresponsible producers. Your responsibility to some fiscal honorability is, I think, crucial, and that judgment is on a daily basis. So it's hard in that sense, in a kind of arrogant moral sense, but it wasn't hard.
Well, I want to hop to something very present. I did notice that the show that you're producing on Broadway now, the new Neil Simon play, The Dinner Party. Always have to check that to get it right. It's a lot of people have used those words. Recouped in 9 weeks on Broadway, which was now several weeks ago.
Brilliant management.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, I give you the accolades for that, but why, when we hear about more and more in this day and age that shows don't recoup, how did you do that?
Nobody's underpaid. The actors are not the issue. There are certain areas that I think the industry, by and large, is excessive in. They come under the, let's use one, marketing, which used to mean my mother went to the store and bought vegetables and came home. Now, it has this
Find the
aura around it of, well, you must be in the New York Times, and you must do this, and you must do that. You must have a billboard, and you must have And the New York Times rates are extraordinarily high. But I think we discovered by asking and by checking all the telecharge, the phone ticket purchases, where our audience was coming from. We discovered that very early on that 60% of them were coming from outside the New York area. Then why do I take daily ads in the New York Times, which cost $8,000 a piece?
A piece?
So we don't.
Okay.
We take every second week a quarter of a page in color in the Sunday Times, which gets across the country. Business always responds to it, and it comes from out of town. We keep checking where those credit card numbers are. And if you can reduce by the design of the show, by advertising which relates not to the ego or the arrogance of the producer, or I want to see my picture in the paper, or my ad in unnecessary advertising or unnecessary billboards. If you can save $20,000, $25,000 a week, multiply that out by 50 weeks, and that's how you make profit. It's not complicated.
It's not complicated, but on the other hand, I think you've just said a lot of very, very important things in a very short period of time.
Well, the industry advertises without result. They take a big ad in the paper and they call up their friends and say, like the ad? Nobody ever calls up and said, did you do any business?
Well, that's interesting. But that's marketing. In a way, that's what we now refer to as marketing, right?
Yes.
I mean, what you described about calling the telecharge to find out where your audience was and stuff like that, that's sort of the marketing department in big corporations.
Yes, but then you have to do something about it, which
Right.
means that you don't have a presence in the place that is chic.
Right.
And if you don't have a presence where it's chic, your friends call up and say, I didn't see your ad in the paper, so you put one in.
Have you found in your producing of Neil Simon plays that each one is a little different, or is there pretty much a Neil Simon audience that responds to each of his current plays?
The Neil Simon experience is that if the audience likes it, and you're objective about that, you don't fool yourself, then it won't matter what the critics say, and it really won't matter how you advertise. They will find you.
Right.
Build it, and they will come. And that has happened. Neil Simon has only gotten one good notice in 20 years from the New York Times, Biloxi Blues. But Lost in Yonkers, which won the Pulitzer Prize, got a bad notice, and Broadway Bound, which Time magazine said was the best play of the 80s. Nothing in that key place. And the audience comes, and you see it. It happens virtually within the first 2-3 weeks. You just watch it creep up. Right. And in the long run, I really believe that that is always the case. It doesn't do you any good to spend $100,000 to do $100,000 worth of business.
Right, right.
And you break even that way. I mean, it's pointless.
You have a long-standing relationship with Neil Simon, and I wanted to sort of ask, using Neil Simon as an example, as specific as you can be about what your roles are. I said to you earlier that 2 years ago we met on the street, and you told me about his new play, which is The Dinner Party, and you said there are three couples, 2 of them are great, 1 of them isn't good. So what did you do between then and now as a producer?
I begged him to make the 3rd one good.
Right, and he didn't throw you out of the room.
Well, no, you have to run that risk. And with Neil and I now know each other for a long time, so each other's dynamics we're conscious of. He knows when I'm playing, and I know when he isn't listening. So you don't go directly at it. You don't say, well, I think the sister should say this instead of the brother. I mean, then you get hit with a rock. You must accept the fact that these plays, and it's not only Neil Simon, it's Tom Stoppard, Fugard, all the people I've worked with, comes out of their sensibility. You may not even like their sensibility. You may not like Neil Simon. You may not understand Tom Stoppard. It's irrelevant. It comes out of their head. It's what you call an artist or aesthetics or whatever. And you're not going to change that sensibility. Perhaps you drop a seed, which 3 weeks later shows up, and then there's a change in the play, which the playwright does not relate to that seed at all. It just gets filtered through his that sensibility, and he writes something.
If I can go back to is The Sunshine Boys the first Neil Simon play that you did?
Yes.
Okay. Designed by Kurt Lundell, no longer with us. Yes. Costumes by Albert Walsky. Were those your ideas? Did you say these are designers that we should put in this project? And Alan Arkin, the director, for example.
You asked something that was 3,000 years ago. I
Well,
mean, do I remember? Albert Wolski had to be one of our suggestions because it was Gene Waltz's cousin.
Oh,
so
see?
that was part of it. But he was a good designer. So was Kurt Lundell, was a wonderful designer, and he was coming off having done one or two good things. So we knew about it. Also, whereas in those days I was new to Neil Simon, so was Alan Arkin. So you don't impose a designer on any director. It's discussed.
It's a
My
collaboration.
hunch is that unless Neil has a definitive opinion, he doesn't care. He writes in that opening page what he thinks should be on the stage. And
I do remember Albert Wolski, since I was a gopher on that production, saying that when Neil Simon says it's a blue suit and you go out and you think, no, I'm going to reconceive this, he's right. It is a blue suit.
A blue
it can't
suit,
be
right.
a brown suit. It's a blue suit.
So the author will dictate that. Sometimes in musicals, the design can be extraordinary. I mean, going back, we talked earlier, the people who transcend their job, Sean Kenny, Robert Crowley, Bob Crowley. But in that case, it had its own problems, as you remember, going from that one set to the studio set.
But is it not the producer's responsibility when a designer is chosen, where designers are chosen, and they come up with their designs that are drawn or their models or whatever, and then you got to make it reality, right?
No, you look at it and you pray to God that it doesn't have problems, because then you don't want to deal with it. The real answer is you want them to do their job, taking your problems into consideration, which are economic at that moment. Any multiple set show has stagehands and costs involved. What you try to do is minimize the amount of personnel needed. Then you say, can we automate this? Can we, how many men do we have that are built in? Can we use them? If we can't use them, can we automate? You try and deal with those economics. That's part of your job. You also have an aesthetic job, which is, I don't like it.
Right.
You know, and that comes up. But you're not the only voice. There's the director, and the author looks at it and says, "That's not what I had in mind.
But
where's this door? Why is this closet over here?" I mean,
when you talk about knowing what should be automated in the number of stagehands, I mean, that's obviously you having come from the management end as a producer, because there is obviously a management side of it.
That's also part of that $25,000.
That's where you would say this doesn't need to be automated, or we'll do it this way, and it can be efficient.
And if you have good relationships with the builders and with the stagehands and with the designers, that becomes part of a normal colloquy.
And those relationships are ones you have built, you personally have built up over the last number of years.
That's a big one, and it's unheralded and unknown. Pete Feller, who was the great carpenter in this industry, did our shows. Well, we were very safe with Pete Feller.
And he would suggest, you were confident that you had a shop owner and builder who would say to you, this is going to cost this, or did he also say, let's do it this way, it'll be less money?
It would be like this.
Okay.
Everybody has their own secrets, assuming a certain amount of knowledgeability. I mean, it's not people come in off the street. Pete knew what the scenery was about. So if the estimate for the scenery were $100,000 and I had $80,000 in the budget.
A budget you had made up?
Yes, which you make up out of whole cloth, because you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You're making a guess based on previous information, but you don't know. And you don't know what shops are on overtime, what shops are available, etc. So it's $20,000 over. And I look at Pete and I say, I don't know how to do it, Pete, but take $20,000 out. Now, he'll either smile and do it, and the molding comes off the walls. Right. I mean, those little bits that he would understand, and that's how he saves you. Also, can this show go from New Haven to Boston and make a decent opening, a Wednesday night opening or something like that? And those are important economic issues. And if you have that right group, a knowledgeable group of people, from the stage manager, but everybody independent, their job not at stake, and they go nose to nose arguing with each other, then you can literally take the play, throw it over the transom and say, we're doing this one, and then show up for rehearsals.
That's great. Now, I love the fact that you obviously have a team. But if I were to hand you a script right now, this is not old style, and you were to read the script and say, I want to produce it, what would be your next step?
It would be different. I'd say, let's read it. Let's have a reading.
Now, would you have done that 20 years ago?
No.
Why?
Because now it costs $2 million.
Right.
And then it costs $125,000. And also,
even though the subway only cost a dime, it's
Broadway is not the Broadway of the 60s or the 50s. And it's too frightening. So
you do
and
agree.
I think that it's more of a common denominator requirement. I think there's been a diminishment in the quality of the plays, diminishment in the quality of the participants, diminishment in the audience. Yes, a diminishment in the audience.
Yes, we'll get there in a second. So if you do a reading, who do you invite to the reading? And
If it's a comedy, you want at least 20 or 30 people in there because you can judge laughs, see whether they genuinely laugh. You always know what a fake laugh, that half laugh,
right.
and then it stops.
Right.
If it's a drama, it doesn't matter. You're going for yourself. You listen, and are you moved? Can you anticipate what it would look like on the stage? You have to remember it's a reading. You try and get the best actors you can for that reading. So you call on your friends. They don't have to be in it, but you want first-rate actors. And
have you hired a director, or do you ask directors to come and hear?
Sometimes you hire a director. But even if let's assume you do have a director. It's a smart move to have a director. That piece in place. And sometimes you'll do this 2 or 3 times.
And the director, I assume,
Dinner Party we did 2 or 3 times.
Just readings like that?
We did one in London, one in LA, one in New York.
Oh, good. With the director involved or not?
No. The last one with the director involved.
And designers?
Was irrelevant.
Irrelevant at that point.
It's a one-set play, yeah.
I see. So then after the reading and everybody, I mean, obviously if you did the Dinner Party 3 times, there was work obviously there were conversations.
Well, we always had that same problem.
Right.
But the discovery of a play, you read it. Let me give you an anecdote.
Okay.
When we did Brighton Beach Memoirs, there's a line in the play where the mother says to the son, "Put the cookie on the table." So you read it. The son goes behind her back into the kitchen, comes out. She's facing the audience. Without looking, she says, "Put the cookie on the table."
Right.
Now you read that.
You don't see that it's that kind of funny.
The first performance, the audience exploded. And I turned to Neil the first night and I said, "Did you know that was funny when you wrote it?" He said, "Yeah."
Of course.
So when I at the reading, it wasn't funny. First rehearsal, I didn't think it was hysterical.
No, but it had to be staged, of course.
And then staged without her looking. Then it's followed by, your Aunt Blanche is upset, your father's upset, put the cookie on the table, and by then the audience is gone.
So back to our model. You've done a reading and it's gone well, and now it's time to have or you have a director. Then next decisions.
If you're going to do it on Broadway, which is rare, normally you try to place it somewhere, make some deal, enhance somebody in some institutional regional theater and have it done there with the hope that your name connected to it will attract enough good actors so that they'll think, "Oh, yes, I'll do it in this institutional theater," and then.
Well, that's what you did with Dinner Party, right?
A Dinner
Sort
Party,
of?
yes. But I suppose that's what the actors assumed, and they ultimately assumed correctly. But Neil was much more sanguine about that play than I was. We had a few words, actually. Even after the L.A. production. The real truth is, after the L.A. production, I said, "No, it's not good enough." And he didn't talk to me for about 3 days. And then it was okay. Then we were back to normal. And the Amundsen, I give them credit, placed it at the Kennedy Center. They had a slot open, a couple of cast changes, and Neil worked on the play, and they got a rave notice in Washington.
Do you think if that play had been done 15 years ago, you would have opened it right on Broadway?
20 years ago, yeah.
Would it have been a success?
I don't know, but it's a good question. But when you commit to a playwright, when I first committed, when Neil said, "Would you like to produce my plays?" That requires a book, not
not this
a joke. And then the commitment, because he was so successful, is that whatever he wanted to produce was produced. You were committing to the totality of the work. If I could have committed like that to stop art, I'd done a number of stop art plays, but I couldn't commit to doing all of Tom's stop art. But in those days, the commitment was so whatever he wrote, you did.
Mm-hmm.
And he would lose money, we would lose money. But that's the way it goes.
And you don't think that happens
now? No. Now it could happen at Manhattan Theater Club or at the Lincoln Center or South Coast Repertory or wherever in the country, that they're committed to certain playwrights and they will do his work, his or her work, and that's healthy. I like that.
Is that partly, do you think, because those institutional theaters have become the producers? What
Of course.
you used to be, what you were 20 years ago,
Without question.
David Merrick?
Yeah. I think South Coast Repertory, for example, probably produces more original work than anybody in the country.
Is that a good thing for the theater?
Well, it's certainly not a good thing for my profession, because
Which
my
is-
profession is just being moved aside. Being that entrepreneurial producer is virtually non-existent now. You don't need them. If the show is done at South Coast and it's good, and then it's gone to Manhattan Theater Club and it's good, and they're going to move to Broadway, what do they need me for? They need a manager, but they don't need a producer. It is in their interest just to get rich people, which is what they do. Or the theater owner themselves, or the Schuberts, the Nederlanders, Drew Jampson, then will do it.
Real. In your experience...
I don't think that's healthy for the industry.
Right. I'm working on a thought. Do you think in all those institutional theaters, which I assume you have some good things to say about, there is one person who does the Manny Azenberg role?
Wow. Yes, I suppose so. I think that there are dramaturgs and but there's something to be said for having your life at stake and doing a play, which none of the institutional theaters have.
Good point.
So when you put your money in, your reputation, your life, your ability to pay your bills is at stake, you are putting in 18 hours of intensity. And if you're also committed to what's on the stage, so you have this other emotional commitment. It's disregarded, the fact that that the producer has some emotional, political, social, something commitment to that play. And you put all of that together, and then you have a little bit of a unique participation, and that is missed.
It has often been said that if you have the money, you can be a producer. If you have a show and you have the money in your pocket, you can be a producer, which sort of means that anybody, in theory, anybody off the street with a lot of money can be a producer. Is that still true?
Yeah.
And what happens
No,
in that
it used to be called an angel.
Right.
Now they're producers. Now they became angels with billing. Now they're the producers. They have the money, they put the name up. Do they replace this function? No, they don't.
Do they try, in your experience?
Well, ultimately they do, but it shows up at advertising meetings when, I mean, it reached, I think it's somewhat ludicrous. When Angels in America won the Tony, what was it, 19 people went up as a producer? They had a break for a commercial.
Well,
the idea of 19 producers is ludicrous.
It's hard. I find it hard when you see 19 people up there and you think, okay, if I were asked to define the role of the producer of that play, who is it and what do they do? So who, I mean, sort of generically speaking, who are those 19 people?
They're mostly people who supported it in one form or another, and mostly money. Or the institution that tried it out, which gave it to another institution, and they tried it out, and then another institution tried it out, and they all go up there. And it's foolish, but it does represent the diminishment of this function, which is no less diminished than all the other functions in the theater. Sometimes a producer doesn't do anything. He manages it. Sometimes they do it, the artists do it by themselves. They don't need you.
But is there another end of the spectrum?
Yes, there are moments. If you gain the trust of the artist.
Being the playwright?
The playwright. Let's start with the playwright. Because you don't talk to the actors. Okay. You don't give notes to the actors. The playwright, if he knows you, trusts you, and respects your perception, he'll say, "What do you think?"
Mm-hmm.
Stoppard did that on The Real Thing, and I use this as an example. I teach at Duke.
But I want to get to that in a moment.
So when asked the question, what does a producer do? Use this one as a... At some dress rehearsal, Stoppard turned around and said, "What do you think?" One, to be asked
Right.
was enough.
Right.
And it was a genuine inquiry. But now I'm old enough to know what the correct responses are. And it was in the second act, 10 minutes into the second act, I was looking at the scenery.
Is that what you said to
Yes.
Stoppard?
And he said, "You're right." 5 days later, he came back and said, "Is it better?" And that's your participation.
But that's
If I am distracted watching the play, I tell him, I don't tell him how to fix it. I just tell him, you're not focusing me. The audience is now drifting.
But that also shows an astonishing trust between you as a producer and the playwright in that instance. I have a suspicion there are other producers who wouldn't say it like that.
It took 25 years to learn that when you talk to playwrights, you have to find out what...
Their language.
You're right. And are you going to be able to approach them? Are you not? Some people will change nothing no matter what.
Right.
I mean, to get them to change punctuation would be difficult. So you don't bother with that. Others are genuinely asking for, "What do you think?"
Mm-hmm.
Stoppard, it's because we also changed The Real Thing somewhat, and we were taking it from England and bringing it to America, so there were some things to be dealt with. Some obvious things, just idiomatically. But Neil, who I have the most experience with, he hears it, but you just...
Right, right.
In Broadway Bound, he's way ahead of you most of the time. He does his own editing.
Right.
You learn not to bring up the obvious... in a play, he had a curtain line once that ended on hemorrhoids. So, and it's a cheap joke, and you see it in every play, no matter what, product jokes. Lemon Pledge will get a laugh.
Right, right.
Words with a K.
Words with a K in it will get a laugh, right.
So, at the end of 3 or 4 or 5 days of playing, I finally turned to him. I said, "Neil, hemorrhoids?" And he said, "Don't you think I know? I don't have anything better."
Right, he'll come up with it.
So, 90% of them he will deal with. He may not knock them out, but he will deal with the weaknesses. Big weaknesses. He had a play after Joan died, his wife died, which troubled him, and it was God's favorite, and it sat in the drawer, sat in the drawer, and sat in the drawer, and he took it out, put it back, took it out, put it back, and it was his anger. It was total, you knew it. This was the Job funny story, but here's this guy who has everything, and his wife was taken from him. So, and I kept saying no. Well, it's a dangerous moment.
Right.
So finally I said yes. And then he said, "Why?" I mean, it was just a total reversal. And I said, "We'll exercise it. If it's good, terrific. If it isn't, we'll go on." And it was no good. But he went on, and we got it over.
Yeah.
So then there's that. When we did Sideshow musical, the creators and the director, we were all friends, and we got to trust each other. So there were many, many exchanges of ideas, very intimate exchanges. The couple of the creators were gay, homosexual, and I'm heterosexual. So we discussed the differences in relationships, in heterosexual relationship, and homosexual relationships, and the similarities. So that in a particular moment in that play, that we didn't get confused. Do you participate? Amazing. Yes, or sometimes you just sit back. Now, and God bless them.
You've been teaching at Duke for years, right, in the theater department there. So that leads me to the question of, if somebody for some reason wants to be a producer, what kind of advice do you give, and what does the Duke program do in that regard?
It's a year and a half rehabilitation to get rid of that idea.
Of being
it's
a
like
producer.
a drug addict. You send them away. We don't. The Duke program is different. It's not about being a producer. I don't recommend it to anybody because of all the things we've just discussed. I think it is With the advent of more and more regional and institutional theaters, that commercial participation person called the producer is, whether it's necessary or not, is irrelevant. It's just not there. And as the prices go up, you're going to need more and more bigger and bigger numbers. And you see there's Disney and there's SFX and the theater owners, which are huge landlords, are all involved. So it's reasonable to say that the era of that independent producer, of the Kermit Bloomgarden and the Leland Haywood and the Merrick and Cohen and all of those, is that I'm the remnant. But and only because of Neil. I survived because of Neil, because Neil remained independent.
But can it come back?
I doubt it.
Is there a generation of people who are passionate about the theater, who could
yes.
be independent producers?
You can't say that it can't come back. But the conditions, it's like saying, can you grow wheat in the desert?
Mm-hmm.
You can plant it, but it's not going to grow. It costs too much money now, and now the money is just dominating. $90 tickets, $70 tickets, $2 million plays. I mean, it's nuts.
You are involved with the transfer of rent, were you
Yeah.
not, or are you not? I mean, in that instance, did you help those producers in the financing and putting it together? And
no, I helped them in there was an irony in that, and that the two men that produced that, Jeffrey Seller and Kevin McCollum, used to work for me in the booking of the shows around the country.
Uh-huh.
The last one they did was Lost in Yonkers, for example. And they did a good job. So we kind of knew each other. And there was a moment, it's interesting, a moment when I could have gone somewhere else. I was asked to go somewhere else. And I said, no, I'll stick with these guys. I didn't know that that was an important moment in their lives, because that show was important. That paid the bills for them. When Rent appeared downtown, they had never produced anything before. So they said, would you go down and look at it and help us? And it was, it's managerial. It's not, because
but you had been a mentor to them somewhat, I would imagine, if they did the tour.
It's too big a word. But in any case,
but I'll give it to you.
I went down. I had to take my daughter down because it's a 80s rock.
Right.
And the music was mysterious to me. I mean, it's a lot of noise. So I turned to my daughter and said, "Is this good, Karen?" She said, "Yes, it's good." It's good. What I did was is that I made the deals for them, the Uptown deals, the Broadway deals.
Because they weren't experienced with dealing with the theater owners and advertising and stuff like that.
Yes. And,
so did they?
And it was definitive. Yeah.
Did they listen to you? How much?
Yeah. I'm not sure they'd listen now, because now they're very successful.
Did they bring innovative ideas? Did they bring ignorance?
They knew a lot about. One, they're very hip on knowing that music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's any, the subjectivity of all of this is that I like this and they like that.
I brought my kids to Rent too. I know exactly what you're talking about.
They loved it. You can't deny that. Go to a rock concert and you sit there and your head is falling off, but there are people that are in ecstasy. So, and they were innovative. And 5 years later, it's still running.
Right. But so in that instance, they're the ones who had the sort of creative side of the producers, and you helped them with the more management nuts and bolts.
Absolutely. I could not possibly have helped them creatively. That's not totally true. There were moments I would have said, I think I'm bored in this moment. I'm not quite sure I'm right or not, but you could cut that a little bit.
Right.
But I wouldn't have thought that any of that would have mattered. That is extraordinary.
I assume that they were two young guys who came to work in your office as a stepping stone to something, to learn the business. Are there any jobs that you would recommend somebody who wants to be a producer not doing?
The jobs that I would recommend they do are stage managers or company managers, general managers, because you get a sense of what's going on the stage, and you get a sense of what the director does, what all the technicians do. It's very comforting knowing it's a genuine fulfillment and achievement to actually understand what's happening. It was an epiphany for me at about age 35. when I actually walked down the street and actually had that moment where I knew I couldn't be fooled anymore. That doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, but that the nonsense jargon, those people who say, if you take this ad, the show will be a smash. This is it. Then you could dismiss all of those people. You understood.
But so what you're saying is that ultimately you have to come to a point where learning a lot of different positions that go on in the theater, you're the person up there, and you make you are guiding the casting decisions, the advertising decisions, the theater.
You sit there, and if there's you have an opinion, my advice would be is keep your mouth shut, because most of it will come out all right before you talk.
See, I think so many people think that's exactly the opposite, that they think the producer is the one who dictates, we will do this, we will do this, we will do that.
It's the director and the author. One, you can't change a word without the author. And two, the director is 9 feet tall if he's a good one.
Right.
And so you sit back, and if you're very lucky, which happens a lot actually, you sit back and reap the benefits of, and provide an atmosphere that these people are comfortable in working. Don't frighten them. Don't make them defensive. If you come up with stupid ideas, then some creativity ends, because they're just defending against your suggestions. Right. You have to let it evolve, and you delay it. Neil's answer, I don't have anything better. You have to accept that the author is now watching his play. He knows the audience is coughing. He's got to figure out what to put in there. You can't tell him the audience is coughing.
Right.
Well, they're coughing because the sister really isn't acting well. That's why. They'll come up with 20, and then they'll start investing into that because they have to defend themselves. You have to be psychologically supportive, always, and patient.
Right. I remember a line in the Sunshine Boys, I was having a flush, and nobody could ever hear the word flush, and he just couldn't come up with anything better, so you watch all the heads bob back and forth. So part of what I'm hearing is this is a collaborative world, and you're the team leader? You're the coach?
It's evolved now because I have a lot of gray hair,
right.
and it's kind of eminence grise. They think you know, so you keep quiet.
The quieter you are, the more you know.
And then you pretend you know. But the truth is, you really don't know how to fix it. You can say, I'm not feeling something at a certain moment, or it isn't working. But remember that picture of an atom when we were in high school? There was the nucleus, and there are the electrons around it, and there are these circles. Well, the nucleus is the playwright. The ones closest to the playwright are the actors and the director. The next ring of electrons are designers. And somewhere on the periphery is a producer.
But I thought the producer owned the whole chart.
No. It's absolutely not true. Out there, that's as close as you get. You have to be content with that distance. That's a very content, happy place to be. If you think you're the creative person, if you walk around with notes, you're making a big mistake. This is, you don't go to Picasso and tell him, I don't think blue,
right.
Yellow.
Get out of that period.
It doesn't work, right.
But David Merrick was the nucleus, wasn't he?
No.
Was he content to be?
That was the press agent put that in the paper, but it wasn't.
Oh, it was the press agent put it.
Yeah, he would make a meal out of certain issues. But if you take Gower Champion and Tony Richardson out of the mix, there is no David Merrick. Merrick had the press agent. Gower and Tony didn't have a press agent. Harvey Sabinson was Merrick's press agent. So you read about David Merrick. But if you said, okay, Gower Champion, you're out, then that takes Hello, Dolly, Carnival, etc. If you take Tony Richardson's out, you don't have the Osborne plays. And, it's not about producers.
But I think so many people feel that producers struggle with raising money, for example. That doesn't seem to be an issue.
Make it an issue, but it has not to do. It has to do with providing these people. These people are represented by money too. I mean, there are. At 3 o'clock in the morning, all the artists want to get paid. They don't want anybody to see it, but they certainly want to get paid. But the producer's participation artistically, it can happen.
But
But don't invest in it.
Don't go into it thinking
no,
that's what
no,
it's...
don't. You're not going to express yourself. You're expressing yourself by the choice that you make to produce. If you choose to do The Lion in Winter, which was our first choice,
Right.
that was a message. Did it have some arrogance? Of course it had arrogance.
No, but also, I mean, you have been able in your career to do those plays, Neil Simon and The Iceman Cometh with Kevin Spacey, in a way that was viable.
Well, it gives me a sense of fulfillment, because you're not going to pigeonhole me. I
Right.
know that I read my name, it says Neil Simon's longtime producer, and I certainly don't resent it. On the other hand, I would certainly like to say, what happened to
Iceman.
Stoppard, Fugard,
Right.
Iceman, Sondheim, Sunday in the Park,
Yeah, that
Master
does-
Harold, no, didn't
Right.
count? But that's because it suits
But you
the literati to pigeonhole the producer. God forbid
Right.
that the producer has some aesthetic sensibility.
But you were able to do in Iceman Cometh, which was last season or the season before, you were able to bring into a Broadway arena a play that is not commercial and make it commercially viable.
I also had a huge catalyst. His name was Kevin Spacey.
Right, willing to do it.
Yes, but he's a friend. And that show was done on a handshake.
And he's a friend because...
He's a friend because we did Long Day's Journey into Night together, and we did Lost in Yonkers together. And when Kevin was not a big star, Kevin we got him off the street on Long Day's Journey.
See, I think that's important that don't,
But
don't underestimate.
The trust was definitive. The story on that one is really simple. I saw it on the second night in London, and I didn't think anything of it. In fact, my thought was, oh, am I glad I saw this, because I don't really want to see 4.5-hour plays. The hemorrhoids becomes a reality then.
No funny jokes.
Right. And the Almeida Theater has benches that were conducive. So I went home, and the phone rang 6 weeks later, and Kevin said, talk, talk, talk. And he said, why don't you do Iceman? And I said, I've done enough O'Neill. I've done a few other O'Neills too that we didn't mention. But I said, why don't you do it with all those people that I'm reading about in the paper? He said, one, I don't trust them. And two, they don't really want to do it as much as they talk in the paper. So I said, oh, nothing like flattery, Spacey.
Right.
Let me call you back.
He gave you a challenge.
I made 2 phone calls. I called 2 people up, said, do your own research. Do you want to lose money on Iceman Cometh with Kevin Spacey? And 2 people said, sure. I said, I'll take you down as I raise it. But would you commit to it? Then I called Kevin back and I said, okay, we'll do it, but everybody works for minimum. No cheating, no lying, no stealing. That was exactly the quote. Nobody.
But that takes guts to say that.
But he's my friend.
I know, but
So
still.
we flew to London, Howard Davies, Kevin and myself, 1 hour, because they were in between rehearsals. Shook hands, and that was it.
But that sounds easy, and there's a lifetime of experience on all sides to
Right.
get to that.
The trust, and it extended nobody ever thought we would make any money or would be successful. It turned out, only 7 performances, 13, 14 weeks, whatever it was, that we made a lot of money. And we had to sit back in the room and say, what are we going to do with this? And we whacked it up, to use that old Broadway expression, arbitrarily. We gave the cast some, gave the director some, and the people who put up the money doubled their money.
Now, if somebody wants to become a producer,
Go to medical school.
go to medical school, and forget it, or do you learn in medical school how to be a producer?
If you want to become a producer now, then you start your own institutional theater.
Now, that's a little cynical, no?
No, that's the reality. The reality is, look who's producing. How many plays are there on Broadway? What, 4? Musicals have to be done by 18 people, because it's $12 million. And it is done by 18 people. So if you really want to be an independent producer with all those things that used to be, you got very little chance, because what are there? There will be 4 or 5 plays a year. That's all. Most of those straight play houses are now occupied with small musicals, the Full Monty, et cetera, et cetera. And good writers are in California.
That's another
Yes,
can of
right.
worms.
So, but everybody's in California. We used to audition everybody here. Now we have to audition mostly in California. Part of the budgets are per diems for actors in California that come to New York. So if you want to produce now, if you wind up becoming the head of American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, South Coast Repertory, the Guthrie, another theater in St. Paul, Arena Stage, Houston Alley,
But that
Manhattan
also,
Theater Club,
that also,
Roundabout.
that also means, because a lot of the people who are running those theaters these days are women or people of color, is producing open to anybody?
Sure.
If you have taste, chutzpah, money, connections, what?
Chutzpah is an element. Money, access to money. Taste wouldn't be bad. That's not easy. Selecting a play.
That's what comes right back down to that.
You come right down, exactly, that it's such a major difference when all the training was read this play, and you read it, and you had to decide whether you were going to do it or not.
But people are still sending you those scripts. Are they
Yes.
just not good?
No, they're not.
Why?
I don't know why, but I would think that the young one, the contemporary playwrights, the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds now have their relationships at the Manhattan Theater Club and the and various repertory companies around the country, or institutional theaters around the country. You also go to England too, and they're always done there. Here's some interesting statistic. Up until the middle 60s, take the plays that were nominated for Tonys. They were all American. About the middle 60s, they started to shift. They became half English and some Irish. So plays that were initiated on Broadway became shows that were initiated in England. With The Great White Hope at the Arena Stage was the first play to really initiate in that period in an institutional theater, and
Right.
then it moved to Broadway.
Right.
So, and then that spread. By the time the 90s came around, there was only one play of the 40 plays nominated in that decade that initiated on Broadway. It was Lost in Yonkers.
Right.
That happened only in a 25-year period. So that which used to be done here by Broadway people moved to Broadway in England, then it became England and institutional theaters, and this part begins to diminish because they don't need you. In fact, you become an obstacle. You're a pain for the theater owner. You are yet another voice for the institutional theater producer. They don't want you there because, one, you're threatening. Two, you may actually know something.
Well, should you work for one of the institutions, not the institutional theaters, but the institutions that are producing more and more on Broadway, Disney? I mean, would that be a recommendation for some?
I don't think it works in terms of those musicals, but those are theme park musicals. I mean, it doesn't really interest me. I have a judge. There's a petty envy thermometer.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm envious of it, but I'm not envious, then I have to suppress my own bad impulses. But I'm not envious of the
What
Disney or the SFX or the theater owner participation. It's just something I just don't want to do.
Are you envious of anybody?
Yes,
These days?
every once in yes, I was envious of. There was one play I really wanted to do, and it was done by friends of mine, so I can't argue with it. It was Arcadia, Stop Art's play. I thought that was a great play, a great play, and I don't think it was done properly yet.
I don't think so either. Why didn't you get it?
For almost exactly that reason. I had done The Real Thing. I'd done another play with Tom called Artist Ascending Staircase. Real Thing was a success. Artist failed. But I didn't want to do Hapgood.
I see. It's like
So I think Tom would have liked it, but I didn't. I helped get it on in L.A., but I didn't want to do it. And then when Arcadia opened, I saw it early in the second, third performance, and I said I would do that one. And he said, am I not better having my plays done at Lincoln Center? Because they'll do all of them. And I said, I can't argue with that, because one, it's Andre and Bernie and their friends, and I like them, and there's some sense to that. The only caveat is that there are limitations in the institutional theater for Stop Art. You can't have English actors. You have to have American actors. And this play is set in Byron, England, and my hunch is that you can't replicate some of those performances. America, that's another, yet another conversation.
We're now at
Michael Gambon can't do A View from the Bridge either.
That's
so.
true. Okay, we're now at the end. Any final words for those people who are crazy enough to want to be a producer?
Yes, I think that there is something missing. And what is missing in the entire theater world is a national theater. Is a place where you aspire to because it's the class. It's like the National Theatre in England. You go to England and you say, I'm going to the National Theatre. It doesn't matter what's playing. You're going to see Richard III for the 15th time. We don't have a place where excellence is it. Doesn't matter, has nothing to do with the money, but if you say, I want this play, my play is being done at such and such theater, you know it's class. And it would attract actors and directors, and that's what somebody with a lot of chutzpah.
Right, and that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manny. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
The American Theater Wing's Guide to Careers in the Theater is a project of the American Theater Wing and the New York Public Library's Billy Rose Theater Collection, Theater on Film and Tape Archive.